So I'm here in Uvita at the Awake venue in Costa Rica, and they're having a unconference called Nostrica. And basically, it is a unconference for enthusiasts in the development of some open source protocol that is going to help people to have sovereignty over their identity in social networks. That's sort of like the idea. And that's so absolutely essential at this time, right?
Mm.
And it's really fascinating to see that Bitcoin is different from the other cryptocurrencies in the sense of the community that's rallied around it. People who are behind Bitcoin, at least from what I'm seeing here, share a kind of a post-capitalist anarchic ideology that's really about the kind of like decentralized systems that are about sovereignty and empowerment of people from the ground up. And it's fascinating to see that, that generation of like ad busters and we know what ad busters is, but talking to them, I asked them like, do you guys know about ad busters? Because I saw the Bitcoin magazine that they had in there, and I was looking through all the articles, and it's about post-capitalism and around like permaculture and metamodernism and like anarchist and revolutionary thought that actually has like deep philosophical principles that are looking at the marriage of both culture and aesthetics in technology and economics. And they're like, we hadn't heard of adbusters. And yet this is like the kind of like next iteration of that. So there's all these people that through the lens of sovereignty, through the economic system, that this cryptocurrency is presented an ideal or a possibility for, have entered into like this opening of consciousness, which is saying, how are we going to be creating more decentralized, more equitable, more empowered systems for human beings, knowing that the head of the snake is the financial system? And so it's like they're sort of coming in and it's like almost like this, the Bitcoin is like the gateway drug in some ways. So this whole postmodernism, I think peaceful anarchic sort of ideology that is so important for this time. And these people are coming in from a systems perspective, from a structural perspective, which is amazing, right? Because it's not just like the consciousness folk that are all coming through, like, peace for the world and meditation and like, protests and stuff like that. It's sort of like coming in much more from the structural lens of being like, okay, but how are we going to create the systems that human beings can interface with to make these ideals a reality, right? And we need both these to come together. And it's cool that it's happening at this venue, which is all about awakening, like awakening consciousness. And people are here from the systems perspective and the structure perspective, but there's going to be yoga classes and a meditation. And it's like kind of all woven in. And it's so nice to see these worlds come together, which is so important. It's exciting to see it.
And it sounds like you're the best fly on the wall
Yeah, I feel like a fly on the wall. It's been fascinating.
because I guess you get to come and go, and your teacher training's coming up. That's afterwards, I guess. Is the event afterwards or?
That's the event afterwards. Yeah. I am giving a talk here though, which is
All right.
interesting. Yeah.
What's to talk about?
The talk is actually, I'm talking, it's the framework is a mythology. So I'm calling it Churning the Ocean. And there's this ancient Indian myth. It's one of the oldest creation myths in India, and it's one that is spread very, very far. In fact, it's the largest motif in Angkor Wat, which is the largest temple structure in Southeast Asia. And essentially, the creation myth shows the struggle between the forces of light and the forces of darkness, the devas and the asuras, in order to produce the nectar of immortality, or the amrit, with the promise of getting that nectar is going to allow the devas to defeat the asuras. But the interesting thing is that the angels and the demons, or the light and dark forces or beings, are actually cousins. They are relatives. And initially, the devas are essentially saying, well, we don't want to work with the asuras, and they're in a position though of almost being defeated because they're weaker, because the asuras have become much more powerful. And so what basically Vishnu says, well, the only way for you to get this, to produce this nectar of immortality, in order for you to have any hope of defeating them, is to work together. And the asuras think, okay, sure, we'll work with them, but we're stronger. So when the Amrit comes, we'll just get it and drink it, and then that's it. It's like it's game over. And the devas essentially the head of the devas, Indra, gets a promise from Vishnu, says you have to trust in grace. Like, you do the work, you stay pure with your intent, and trust that I will be there in the moment to ensure that you get the Amrit. And so they have to do it with the trust that the divine being is going to come in with grace
Oh,
if they work together in the churning process. And it's a fascinating myth,
wow.
and that's what I wanted to run by you today with sort of the talk. The theme of the talk is how do we engage with the so-called enemy? How is it that we need to interface with the status quo systems, the systems of the power over paradigm, of the extractive paradigm that have produced tremendous wealth and tremendous technologies that are operating the majority of the systems and structures that humanity lives under or sort of works within, in order to produce the new systems, the new models of empowerment, the new technologies, so that we can get wide scale adoption, trusting that we need to engage in this churning process in order for this nectar, or whatever you symbolize that nectar to be, which, for everybody is a different idea. It's essentially whatever their ideal of freedom is, whatever their ideal of goodness and beauty is sort of that nectar of immortality, right? Which ultimately translates to power on some level, but it's not a power over paradigm.
I mean, you sure do land in the right places, and I think what you're saying is, at what point in their process are you giving the story? Like, is it the beginning, the end, the middle, or anything like that? Or
In the middle, in the middle.
because I think I would, I don't know how much you can sit in on their talks and hear what they're doing and all that, but it might be a good idea to synthesize everything they've done up to that point, and then take some of the languaging from what they're doing. I mean, I think you already have it, but it might be obviously
You're right.
a bit easier to really scope and maybe interview a few people, and then take what they have, bring that story in, and then sort of point them in the right direction for the second half.
Well, I mean, it's an unconference. So basically there's two stages. Um, Not everybody will come and attend my talk, some will, but it seems to be of interest because I'm the only one speaking on like mythology or anything like this, and otherwise a more protocol tech kind of a conference in general.
Right.
And it's surprising to me how much interest there is, that all of us people are hungry for a mythical viewpoint,
Mm.
because we all are drawn towards this kind of work because we're impelled by a force that is greater than ourselves. Like, why is it that we love Star Wars or Lord of the Rings or, these mythic stories? Because on some level we resonate with the fact that this world is a stage and we are a player on it, and that we are part of a much larger process unfolding. And the sense of meaning and purpose in life comes to what is my heart and what is my part and how do I play it, right? Like, how do I find my side in this churning of these forces, and how do I engage it in a way that is even more valorous and also more noble and more virtuous. And so, I think that mythology can answer that question rather than like religion or morality. And science doesn't quite answer it either. So I think the talk could be of interest to people on that level.
Do you have how much time do you have for it?
I have 30 minutes, but he was like, he's like, it's pretty open. So if you want to go longer, then that's okay. Like, I can go, I could probably take an hour, but,
Do you know what I might
30,
suggest? Do you have the cards with you?
yeah,
Maybe at the very beginning,
yeah,
hand out, give a random value to each person,
yeah.
and just say, I want you to hear me through this value. Give your talk for the first 30 minutes, then the second 30 minutes, create a discussion, have them giving what they heard through that value.
I mean, I could see value in that, but what I think is it'll take them out of the mythic lens that I want them to be in. Like, I almost want them to be in a space where they're in wonder, almost like they're not trying to think, because a myth is sort of designed for that. So
What,
I
what
feel
about
like
this? What about this? Why don't you make I don't know how many people expect. 50, 100, or you don't know? You don't know.
I don't know. It
Yeah.
could be
Another thing
could be more.
could be make some cards up, or maybe I could quickly make some cards up. When's the talk?
It's it's at 1:30 p.m. on the 20th. But what would be cool is I could have your values cards out there, and let me think about it, because it could
Well,
be interesting for them.
let me finish it.
Yeah,
Maybe a better idea.
yeah.
We make some cards, and we have the 12 stages of the epic hero. You print out, let's say, enough. You could just do small little things, but a phase in that 12-step process.
Yeah.
And then you could, I mean, that's, I guess, if you want some more interaction with the crowd, but then have them say, how much did that, are you in that, which stage are you in relationship to this larger mythos I just gave you?
So how about, what would be helpful for me is, why don't I read you a bit of what I've written, and then kind of get your feedback of like, okay, well, how might you go? Because I've written the first part and I'm like, okay, where should I go for the second part, basically?
Okay. That sounds cool.
And then you'll get a context, right? So I've written this and I'm kind of deciding, I mean, this part that we're talking now, I'd rather it not go online, to be completely honest, because it's sort of behind the scenes. But the first part I'm okay with, just as a little update of what's happening in our conversation.
Yeah.
But this is something I've written. I'm trying to decide how much do I memorize this and how much do I improvise it. But anyways, I'll read you what I've written.
Okay.
There's an ancient drama that plays out through the annals of history, a pattern of movement so intrinsic to the very makeup of existence that it manifests on the level of the subatomic to the cosmic scale. Duality is the very basis of the universe, the interplay of light and shadow, of good and evil, birth and decay, suffering and liberation, is an eternal dance in which we all partake. In Indian cosmology, this dance is called the Tandava, the dance of Shiva. You can see it emblemed in the statue that is at the figure of the doorway of the CERN headquarters in Switzerland. For how else, then, through mythology, could one speak of the immensely complex interplay of forces that underlie the very fabric of existence, of the emergent properties that give rise to the countless phenomena in a perpetual exchange of energy and information beyond the calculation of even the most advanced scientific instruments? Yes, science, despite all its advances, can only speak of the universe in terms such as quarks, protons, spins, black holes. Do they not sound mythical? Even words that we think we know the meaning of are in fact a mystery. We don't yet actually know what gravity is. We just know how it works and its effects on matter. So while we are absorbed in the dramas and struggles, the ideals and triumphs that characterize our lives, the myths point us towards the greater pattern in which our stories are but a part, a note in the vast symphony of the universe, the one song. Our lives are in fact theaters upon which the cosmic drama itself is played out. It is a stage where the archetypal forces that animate the world are expressed through us. Does this sound too out there? Perhaps. And yet, why do we resonate so deeply with The Matrix, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars? Because we intuitively recognize these stories as metaphors for the larger forces of life, in which we all play some kind of role. The ancient civilization of India understood this very well and expressed it through her mythologies. In the beginning, everything was one. A vast potential, both still and seething within the seed of all that can and will be. Just as we began in the womb, all of creation started in the cosmic egg, called Hiranyagarbha. Within this egg is the pure consciousness that pervades all of creation. Just as the form of the womb in which you began, the very life energy and intelligence that built your body continues to infuse your every organ and limb, never separate from you. And yet, once this birth happens and the child is separated from the egg, it is pushed into the world of duality. Now there is light and dark. There is hunger and satisfaction. There is fear and safety. Our experience of duality begins and characterizes our life. Within the very organs of the child itself is an endless churning. You can see it in a child, the sudden changes from utter bliss and presence to wild terror and discomfort, to peace and rest. And then the cycle begins again. For within each of us continues this push and pull of energies in which the cosmos is being built, destroyed, and recreated. For we are the universe, becoming aware of itself in endless iterations. So from within this egg that all life began, every particle of existence is connected through a thread of truth, of consciousness, which is never born nor dies. And in this light, every living particle is part of a collective consciousness that ever asserts and amplifies, devolves and evolves again within the dimensions of time and space. Each planet in its orbit gathers in and gives out forces, and thereby transmits a particular wavelength of energy for maintaining the order of the solar system. The planets are perpetually flashing forth with energy in different patterns and cycles of transmission, weaving the web of life and creation. And so it is with this background of the duality of light and shadow, of freedom and bondage, that this background of our myth begins. That's sort of how I'm starting. So it feels a little bit long-winded right now, actually.
Do you want some feedback on it?
Yeah, I haven't even told. So then I'm going to tell the story. But
Okay.
I feel like I would probably, if I was here at the conference and going to listen, I might actually speak more from the moment.
Well, I mean, what I was hearing, okay. I drifted in quite a few places.
Yeah.
Even though it sounds very intelligent. And it sounds as if you're speaking for you rather than speaking to the audience.
Okay, good.
It sounds like, I think just what you said in terms of, I think you're, because this you'd have to kind of memorize, right? Or semi-memorize, and it changes things. And I think that the field is going to be strong. They've been there for half the time.
Yeah.
I think you have a huge potential to actually launch them in a
To capture the
specific
moment.
direction, to capture it and to have them create their own story. Like what, it's almost like what story are they creating up until now? And it's probably jumbled. It probably isn't. And they need to create a story. Like, what is the story of Bitcoin? How is Bitcoin actually going to change the world? And how is what's coming out of this conference right now going to change the world? And I think you're only going to figure that out by, again, really tapping into what they're doing.
Feel what
Find the
they're
right
doing.
people. Like, have 3 or 4, just be everywhere. You're such a good networker, you'll be friends with everybody by that time. And I think it will come to you. And I think you should start. Do you have the Han with you?
Or have the hung with me. Yeah, I should bring
I
it to the yoga class in the morning.
I
Actually,
would
it's a great idea.
I would start with the Han, and maybe even the whole thing on it. I'm not sure, but at least start. I
Yeah.
think, I don't know what kind of room is. I think you should have like a dark and a light place on stage. Like, have one place where it's very well lit and one place that's dark.
I wish I could, but I'm doing it outdoors. If I had the right venue, the other venue is so beautiful. It's all like, it's the perfect venue for storytelling, but they've already said it was my fault. I thought the venue I was in was the right one, but it's not. And I don't see another way.
What about even maybe, is there any way that you could have get like some sort of curtain, maybe a see-through curtain that can hang somewhere and you can move between behind the shadow and the light kind of thing? Because it just seems that I was trying to get imagery. I wasn't getting a lot of imagery from what you were talking about. And I think you have to really step into being the storyteller with your movements, with like how you dress, how the scene is, and to, I think that Han will just bring them all in. Maybe even like, because the thing is like, it's the field effect, right? What you want to do is you want to amplify their field, because there's more than 20 people. You can, the Han and drawing them into the story will get them all sort of mesmerized. And you have to have a methodology where they can't just come and go and people interrupt. Have a couple of gatekeepers, have a couple of people that make sure that, you know what I mean? Like, you're creating sacred space for them. And it could be, and from the field, you will channel the right thing, like have your points, know what you want to talk about, but really step into that, okay, it's going to come through me, rather than try to memorize something. Unless you have specific stories, like you have, the things which you can bring it at any time. But I think you're at a pivotal moment. I think it's just a wonderful timing for them and you. And make sure you
Yeah,
get it filmed. Make sure you have.
it is going to be filmed. They have professional filming. It's going to be live streamed as well.
Okay. Oh, awesome.
And then it'll be recorded. And I really wish I was in the other venue, but I just don't think that's going to happen.
Give me tell me the time, send me the live stream, and get Rom maybe to put it on Unite.
Or Unify. Yeah, that would be great. I mean, they should. I'm sure they'll do this. They're going to start doing it. I think everybody's going to love this, because all these tech bros coming to Costa Rica to this venue, like, they're going to love it. They're going to keep wanting to come here.
Oh man, I mean, especially, yeah, get it streamed on.
People with Bitcoin, like, these guys made a lot of money, man. Like, the guy one of the guys who's organizing here, he was mining Bitcoin in 2009, mining it in 2009. Do you know what that means, dude?
Oh my God.
Do you know what that means if you're mining Bitcoin in 2009?
You're a billionaire.
It's crazy, dude. There's a lot of folks here that, like, it's a lot of money in this place right now. Well, and these are the people who want to create the new systems. They've all come here, and they're like open to doing yoga and some consciousness shit too. So they're not just and so it's like, wow, fascinating. So it's a really good, and this is just a start. I feel like this is the first time they're doing this. It's going to keep growing. So I just want to make some relationships and inspire people with the story. And for me, the focus is this interplace between culture, consciousness, and technology. That's sort of my focus now, is where these three areas intersect. And I think for the folks here, what I want to impress upon them is that there is this the notion of life has set themselves up in what appears to be dualities are in fact polarities. And when we view a duality from the lens of a polarity, all of a sudden they become mutually complementary differences rather than opposites. And that's what's very important, right? Which is that it seems that if opposites are interdependent, then they're not opposites. They're in fact mutually amplifying contrasts. That we need those others to provide contrast, like to what it is that we're doing, right? To the degree that we are for good, or the degree to which we are for sovereignty or for freedom. And we don't see that unless we have the contrast that's amplifying it to us. So how are we going to then relate to those? And that's what's very important. What the myth is providing is essentially saying, well, what if these people are your family and they're your cousins? Just like in the great myth of the battle of the Mahabharata, where Arjuna had to kill and fight his own family members. It was necessary on the battle. He didn't want to, but Krishna said, you have to, because this is your duty. So fulfill your duty and trust that in the process that you are actually fulfilling a purpose bigger than you. And if you don't, then you will lose. People will no longer believe in what you stand for. If you don't fight it, people will stop believing in what you represent because of your hesitancy to act in the moment of necessity. Now, in the context of this mythology, the divine desires vitality for all its subjects. So it utilizes gods and demons. It utilizes the good and the bad, the powers of creation and the powers of destruction to secure that vitality. Because what is it that is giving us this inspiration and this passion to act? It's actually the contrary force, the apparent opposite. Like in the face of what is trying to suppress the life force energies on Earth, what is trying to control and manipulate and extract, it actually vitalizes our own impulse for truth, our own impulse for justice or for goodness. So should we not actually, in a way, have a sense of willingness to engage, because that is what provides us the vitality to further our action? So when we have that context of mutual polarities, then it's like, okay, how do I use this actually to keep me going? And then how do I interact with it in a way that is going to feed me the energy required to build what I know is going to be for the good of all? Because at the end of the myth of the churning of the ocean of milk, essentially, I mean, I feel like I don't know if I want to tell you the whole story now, because it's a full myth, but it's a very good one. Do you want to just hear the myth?
Yeah, yeah.
So basically, once upon a time, the Devas were suffering at the hands of these Asuras, and Asura means Asurya, against the light, right? So having lost their position, because of Lord Indra, who's the head of the Devas, because he was arrogant towards a great sage. And in ancient Indian mythology, just because you're a sage doesn't mean you don't get pissed off. So you piss off a sage, he doesn't care whether you're a god or a demon, he's going to curse you. And the curse of a sage is a serious curse. You don't want to get cursed by a sage. So Indra, the lord of the gods, got cursed by a sage. And
What?
that holy man's curse weakened all the gods due to the arrogance of Indra. Because in the Indian cosmology, that just because you're a god doesn't mean that you're not arrogant. And isn't that true in the world today? Even those beings that are supposedly holy or saints or spiritual, they also have arrogance and they also have egos, right? So even within the Indian mythology, that a being that's for the light can also be beset by arrogance. So anyhow, so now because Indra has been cursed by this sage, the gods are losing the battles to the demons. And so for help, he goes to Vishnu, who is the Lord of creation. And he advises them to obtain the nectar of immortality, the Amrita. Now, the problem is that this nectar lies at the very bottom of the vast ocean of milk. And the only way the gods can obtain it is by churning the ocean with this mythical mountain called Mandara, using the serpent king called Vasuki as a rope to churn it. Now, the gods were a little bit frustrated by this challenge, and they asked Vishnu how they're supposed to do this. I mean, it's immense. Like, think about it, trying to churn an entire ocean by wrapping a serpent king around a mountain. I mean, this is no small task, right? So they're like, how do we complete such an insane project, right? And so he says, well, you're going to have to go to your cousins, the Asuras, the demons, who are your enemies, but you have to go and ask them for assistance, because you cannot do this alone. You have to do it with them because they have great power. Only with partnering with their power will you have the ability to do this immense task of churning the entire ocean of milk. And so the gods naturally worry, but what if the demons help? Then what happens if they get the nectar? Then what? Then we're screwed, right? So like, I don't think we can do that. We should do this. But Vishnu, he assures them that if they don't covet the contents of the ocean that appear during the churning, and if they can remain calm, even if the demons attempt to steal the nectar, he will assure the gods of its possession. They will get it. But that's a great ask. He says, well, a lot of things are going to come out of this. A lot of wonderful things, even the nectar when it comes out, but you're going to covet it. And if you remain afraid that you're going to lose it when it comes out, then you won't get it. So you have to have a different state of mind than the demons, who are all about coveting and stealing, right? And so the gods, they secure the help of their cousins, and they dig up the mountain, Mount Mandara, and begin to carry it to the ocean. But unfortunately, the gods are so weak that the mountain crushes many of them, which prompts a rescue by Vishnu, and his mount Garuda, who is Garuda is the vehicle of Vishnu, and he's the mythical lion bird. So intervening further, Vishnu promises the snake Vasuki, because Vasuki's like, I don't know if it's worth it. Like, I don't know if I want to be involved in this project, because it's not an envious position to be used as a rope to churn the ocean, right? It's not exactly the most fun position to be in. But Vishnu says, don't worry. If you give yourself to this, I'll give you a share of the nectar, and the mountain won't harm you. So Vasuki agrees to serve as the rope to be churned. So then the gods and demons, they begin to churn. And alas, unsupported, the mountain immediately begins to sink to the bottom of the ocean. So Vishnu turns himself into a giant tortoise and supports it on his back, dives underneath the ocean, holds his breath, willing to stay as long as possible or as needed in order for the gods and demons to continue to churn. And to the dismay of all, the ocean, the first thing that it releases, far from a nectar, is a viciously lethal, poisonous gas that is suffocating and killing the gods and demons. Wasn't that interesting that seems to be the first thing that comes out of the churning?
Vishnu left that out.
Yeah, he left that out. Exactly.
Oh, by the way.
By the way, the first thing that's going to come when you gauge in the churning of the forces of light and darkness is actually going to be a hideous poison. And so for help, the gods turn to Shiva, the yogi, the lord of destruction, who volunteers to drink all the poison out of the ocean in order to protect the gods. So he takes a big bowl and he scoops all the poison up into his bowl, and he takes it and he begins to drink it. And as he begins to drink it, his wife, obviously afraid that, knowing Shiva, he's a yogi who does no fear. He's fearless. Right? And she's like, no, this is not right. You can't drink an entire ocean of poison. So she goes and she holds his throat so that the poison doesn't go down into his heart or into his belly, nor into his head. And he becomes known as the Nilkant, the blue-throated one. So Shiva, having saved them from that, the gods decide to continue to churn, right? And so they're churning. And once the nectar arises, in fact, actually, I should say this, that many things come out of this churning process before the nectar arises. Jewels come out, beautiful instruments come out, the wish-fulfilling cow comes out, the wish-fulfilling tree emerges, all kinds of herbs and all kinds of wonderful things come out, but they were told by Vishnu not to covet any of these things that come out of the churning. So they have to not focus their attention on them and just focus on doing the work. Focus on doing the task at hand. Don't get distracted by all those little things. So they keep churning and churning and churning. Finally, the Amrita, the nectar, comes out, and following Vishnu's command, the devas, the gods, decide not to attempt to retrieve it. And pleased, Vishnu notes that the nectar has actually divided the demons, because now they start fighting amongst themselves to get that nectar. And he had promised the devas that he will give it to them. So what he does is, while they're fighting amongst themselves over this nectar, he takes the form of Mohini, who is a beautiful female seductress. She's called an Apsara, and she entrances them with her beauty, and she reveals her breasts to them, and they go mad with lust. And as a result, he's able to secure the nectar from them. Then she distributes it to the gods, leaving none for the demons. Realizing they've been tricked, the demons attack the gods, but they're defeated by their newly energized cousins who have just drank the nectar of immortality. So now the gods finally reestablish their sovereignty. And Brahma, one of the creator god, has to negotiate for them a peace with their cousins and vanquished enemies, the demons, so that they can continue to coexist in this dance of mutually amplifying contrast, which is what they are. And that's the story.
Wow, that's a good one. How does the churning of the sea relate to sort of Bitcoin and the eternal life And I guess is the Asuras, are they the sort of like the Bank of International Settlements and the WEF and the UN and all the intelligence agencies? Is that basically the same thing?
So there's my ways I could interpret it and ways I might invite them into the interpretation. So what I'm considering is, to what degree do I provide the interpretation, or do I invite them into a process that I allow them to elicit who the players are, really? Which could be interesting for them to. I was thinking I can give a little bit, and then I was like, well, maybe I introduce them to a process where they get into groups and they sort of say, okay, who are the devas and who are the asuras? Like, what are these forces? What is the nectar, and what is the meaning of not coveting the things that emerge out of the churning, right? And basically, what does the snake represent? Right? What is the, like, because there's some other little notes in the story that are interesting. For example, Vishnu says, let them choose which side of the snake they want, and they get the head. So the head of the snake could be the financial system. Like, the demons get to choose, being like, hey, what do I get? They're like, we want to get money.
Right.
That's the thing, right? And that, for them, that gives them tremendous power, right? But interestingly, at the end of the story, Lakshmi, who's the goddess of abundance, comes down, because whenever there's been a battle, the goddesses think, well, there must be at least one good man out there, right? Because that's where you get to find men of courage and valor, hopefully. And all of the devas, they're always like, at the end of the thing, they're all parading their exploits and how courageous they were, so that they can get the attention of the ladies. But the ladies can see into their heart, because Lakshmi doesn't just look at the outer form, she can look into the heart of each individual. And she sees Vishnu standing at the end there. And what did Vishnu do? For the whole battle, he turned himself into a tortoise. He dove underneath the bottom of the ocean and bore the weight of the mountain, so the entire drama could play out. He had given the ultimate sacrifice and gone to the lowest place. And yet at the end, he stood there quietly, not saying a word. And she saw his heart, that he had been the one who was willing to serve the good of the whole with humility. And she said, that's who I want. And for that reason, Lakshmi married Vishnu. For the goddess of wealth and abundance flows to the one who is willing to serve the good of the whole, the good of the collective, which I thought was a very interesting point in that story, that that's who Lakshmi decided to marry. Again, those are points that could be interesting to the Bitcoin folk, right? Like, how do they see that?
Okay, how about this? You telling the story is the crescendo. Them breaking off in groups, I think as a teaching tool, I think it would be great for them to figure out in groups what those things mean. So
Yeah.
the ease out is them figuring it out. The connect and unify is each group presenting a quick summation.
Yeah.
In the finish, you give your interpretation, which then we got to go back to the start, the setup, and the build up as how do you set that story up? So
Exactly. The start, the setup, and the build up. That's how I need to frame the beginning.
and I would again, I think I don't think it's a good idea to write and memorize and do what you I don't think that I think you captured something, but you're missing the connection with the audience. And I think that however you do your start, setup, and build up to get to that story needs to be somehow context related to what you've learned and what they're doing.
Ram might be good to talk to, because he would probably get how this myth in Indian mythology could like connect to the languaging for them, right?
Oh, for sure. He might, I think he'd probably give you some good ideas about how to make the build up. Like how to, well, it's the set, it's like, that's such a great story. And it's a great teaching tool. But yeah, I think you got to figure out the start, setup, and the build up in a way that makes it.
So from the start that I began, what of there was of interest to you? Do you remember any of it?
Well, there's a huge difference between someone reading from something and someone speaking from their heart, fundamentally, right? And I find that I don't remember right now, I don't remember any of it.
Great. That's encouraging.
But what, no, but while I was listening, you know, this is intelligent and this is very well written and you got a beautiful voice and it's very nice. But it just seems, again, not that it's out of context. It's just it didn't mention I think you have to mention Bitcoin. You have to mention the current situation in something that's more
Totally. Yeah, exactly.
tangible, something that's
Like this
more,
is where we are in this moment. Let's
yeah,
let first contextualize this moment.
yeah. Like even them coming here, like what happened? You know, we came out of COVID and the banking system looks like it's about to collapse, and you know, the governments look crazy, and the Asuras seem to be freaking running the world, and they're gonna introduce this digital ID and fuck us all by having a CBDC. You know,
Yeah,
this is, I didn't hear that. Like there should almost
exactly.
be a fear that you should be, you know, the village is burning.
We
There's
are living
fire.
we are living in mythic times, my
Yeah.
friends, right?
Like
Like the context of
you are
like
on the battlefield. You are,
yeah.
and
Right.
you know, they should be kind of like shitting their pants to, okay, give us the answer, man. Like what,
Yeah, exactly.
you
That's
know?
true. I got a frame that we are living in mythic times. And
Yeah,
what are the forces at play? What is at stake here right now?
yeah.
Right? Where they feel like, whoa, hold on a second, like this, they know, and everybody knows that. That's why they're some part of them knows that, right?
Do you know what it
So,
is? It's Rivendell.
okay.
This is the nut. Like the people in the room are like
We're in
all those
Rivendell right
people.
now, over here where we are.
Well, I'm just saying at that when you give your talk,
Yeah.
it's like the Council of Elrond, and you're at Rivendell, and they're all talking about what to do about the ring. And at some point, 9 of them step up and go, okay, we're going to create the adventure. But there was maybe 20, 30 people there. And Elrond had just said, this is the situation. Gandalf's there. And then all of a sudden, Frodo goes, okay, I'm taking the ring. And Aragorn says, I'm with you. And that, I think, is part of the myth of, because they know Lord of the Rings, right? Sometimes you got to point to the story of where you're at. You guys are heading into Mordor. You guys, you like, what is it? I think the One Ring is usury. I really do. We
I'm gonna
have to
pull up their thing.
destroy. We have to destroy the ring, which is. It's actually. Can I read you something? Did
That's
you?
true. Why is he trying? He's trying to destroy the ring because that means that means that Sauron will never get it, right? If they destroy the ring,
Well,
then they
destroy
can't. It
Sauron.
can't be Bond.
It also destroys Sauron
Why does Sauron get destroyed if the ring is destroyed?
because he put so much of his energy and power into making the ring that his essence, I think, was connected to it. So when it broke apart in Mount Doom, Sauron basically disintegrated.
What
And
did you think of this? What did you think of the Amazon series?
I've only seen a few of them. I haven't seen enough to see it. I mean, it looked anything to do with Lord of the Rings. I love, you know,
Yeah.
you know, it's the Similarium is a little vague in the background. I do remember some of it, so I'd have to sit down and watch the whole thing. I don't know.
So hold on. So let me just premise what I understand this is about. So this is what they say on their website. A decentralized social network with a chance of working. A simple open protocol that enables a truly censorship resistant and global social network. So they're trying to resist censorship and have a social network that's resistant to that everybody a censorship resistant global social network. Okay. So for them, in some ways, the forces, social media, which uses your attention to sell ads, uses bizarre techniques to keep you addicted, decides what content to show you based on a secret algorithm, has complete control over who can participate and who is censored, and is overrun by spam and bots. For them, the social media giants, people who are controlling social media, are the demons, are the Asuras.
Right. Well, I mean, I would add in, because, you know, it was basic, you might even bring in Hunter Biden's laptop and what happened before the election, where it was shown that everybody knew and everyone was in on it. All the intelligence agencies, all the corporate media, everyone put a stop to the censorship, stopped anything to do with Hunter Biden's laptop, because that would have lost the election no matter what. So the Asuras are also, you know, I think the IMF, the Bank of International Settlements, like all the larger because they're all in on it. Everybody, all the ones who are trying to bring in the CBDC. And so these guys at Rivendell are like the people come together to try to come up with something that is going to fight the dark forces. Something that has true integrity, something that's actually good for the people. And I think what COVID did is it separated the sleepers from the people who are awake. Because if anyone still is kind of still going along with the government narrative, I mean, you know, they're never going to change. They're never going to wake up. So to me, that all of the people there are probably awakened. They're all high vibe, but they're lacking that organizational methodology to actually come together in a way. I mean, that's what they're building, right? They're building a methodology to create communication protocols, which is the key to command and control, right? The key to anything is command and control through communication.
Well, in the context of this, like, say for them, what is the biggest challenge for social media is to get adoption? How are you getting people to use it? Right? Like the holy grail would be somehow you get adoption. That's like the nectar, right? Which ultimately, let's say right now, the nectar is attention. That's what attention is, the thing, right? Like users on social media are basically, it's the attention economy, and your ability to maintain and hold people's attention is what gives you money. You mine their data of what they give attention to, and you're able to sell them based on their attention. So say Nostr gets big and it starts to get attention and people are using it. I think what, in the context of this story, which is, you know, how do you not
well, you could also bring, they're about to
become,
they're looking to ban TikTok. That's very relevant right now. Because
where in the US?
Yeah, 100 million people are using it 90 minutes a day. That is the media network right now of most people.
Do you think it's good if we ban TikTok?
Not at all.
Okay.
But it is, the Asuras are basically like Facebook and Instagram want TikTok to stop because they've taken all the attention away, right?
So, but why would they ban TikTok? Because it's Chinese, right?
Well, that's what they're saying. They're banning it because there's too many people sharing knowledge around the things they don't want to share knowledge about. Like the awakened people are all on TikTok.
Really?
For sure. For sure.
More than Facebook.
Oh, I mean, I think Facebook is dead to anyone who has any. They've said, like, I mean, to me, they've just censored so much that they've become a liability. I mean, they're just, people hate Facebook. Before it was different, but with the censorship and what happened with the COVID and even mentioning any, like, they took away the ability to have any real debate. Right, it was just one-sided, and I think they completely lost. You know, I think they're like MySpace. You know, they just don't know it yet. As soon as anything comes along that's going to be better. I mean, TikTok's already done it. I mean, people, I think, still use Facebook, but you know, it's dead. They're not even paying their creators. Like they're just, everything they do is always to make money, and because of that, they lose the point. You know, I mean, humans, we're sick of that. Everything's always about money. It just creates this sickening society. And so there has to be, you know, there has to be some focus on truth and the ability to be able to express your truth. You know, looking at, I don't know if you saw in Iran, there's these five young women in Iran that did a TikTok dance without their headdresses on, and they got arrested, and now they disappeared. And you know, I just posted it on Facebook. But you know, it's the worlds are colliding right now, and it's so obvious. Like the apocalypse is the unveiling. Everything is being exposed. And so, do you know, did you see that redemption thing I sent to you?
No.
Did you? I recently read this very interesting explanation of the Matrix. And
oh yeah, I didn't read that. Something about it seemed far out, but I just, for some reason, I admit, whatever.
if you can read it, because it shows something in terms of how to attain peace, and I think it's exactly what you're talking about in terms of with the Asuras, about how do you make peace with your enemy. And within redemption, it's almost saying the creator has made it so if you look at your enemy and you treat them like an enemy and fight, okay, you've lost. But if you can make peace with your enemy, that's what this is all about.
Right. That reminds me of this quote I have to pull up here.
And
This
you know what it
quote
is?
by
It's debt. It's like the
debt.
the cause is commercial debt. How do you bring a society that is at constant warfare to peace? The cause is commercial debt. To end the war, one must either make arrangements to end the debt liability of the debtor side of the wave by discharge forgiveness or as an operation of law, or else the creditor must be offered some concession which would end the war by offering something that is more desirable than the collection of the debt. In essence, the war started when machines wanted representation in government. Like we're entering, we've been so prepped for this in terms of our relationship with the machine world. You know, in terms of Star Trek and all the movies about AI and cyborgs and consciousness. We're entering into a completely different world. AI, you know, this is the year of AI. And it's like, imagine the first year when electricity came in, and all of a sudden everyone just started making things that plugged into electricity in a home.
Yeah.
You know, that's where we're at. Like we are now plugging into AI, and things that were impossible are now possible. And I think
like Elijah getting his card manual done.
Yeah. Yeah.
So good impossible things happen. And so that's why I think it's interesting that we look at it. It's a perfect example of you using the tool that could otherwise be negative. And what are you using it for? Well, for what you see as the side that is for the liberation of human economic power and really human sovereignty and human consciousness. That's why the quote I think I should open with that sums up basically everything that I wrote in the beginning on some level in one paragraph, which is always nice to find, is Bill Moyers asked Joseph Campbell, he said, "You say that mythology is the study of mankind's one great story. What is that one great story?" And you know what Campbell said? He said that we have come forth from the one ground of being as manifestations in the field of time. The field of time is a kind of shadow play over a timeless ground. And you play the game in the shadow field. You enact your side of the polarity with all of your might. But you know that your enemy, for example, is simply the other side of what you would see as yourself if you could see from the position of the middle. You know that your enemy is simply the other side of what you would see as yourself if you could see from the position of the middle. He said that's the great story. To see that the other is you from the position of the middle. Except you can't see that because in the drama, in the play, we have to enact the polarity for the churning to take place. And you have to play your side of the polarity because no churning happens if everybody stands in the middle. churning only happens if one person's pulling this way and the other person's pulling that way. And that's the only way in which the drama of life can be played out. And from the willingness to churn on either side, something gets created out. Fortunately, we get to choose which side we want to play.
Okay, I got something for you. You can do maybe. Get your audience to divide into two parts. One is the Asuras and one is the Divas. And so, and use that as a talking mechanism of going, when you're speaking about the back and forth.
I thought of that, but then I went to the venue today to look at it. I was like, this is going to be so hard because they've got so many tables and so many things. Like I'd have to redesign the whole thing. And I would have to do it for a very compelling reason. Like I'd have to really use it.
Well,
so
I've always, this again, I'm sort of projecting onto you what I always would want to do, but through a series of questions, I would want to segment the audience, to sort of like, who believes in 9/11 and who doesn't, kind of like, because there's such, when you're talking to an audience that you don't know, they're just a bunch of people, right? But as soon as you start to segment them, now you're segmenting them by their beliefs. And now the audience can kind of see itself. I just think it would be cool if you had one was the Asuras and one were the Divas, and you use that as a methodology to make a.
I thought about it. I'm going to sit with it. If I can use it well enough to justify this whole like switching of the thing, then I will. But that quote I shared with you, do you think that that's part of the setup or that's part of the closing?
It could be both. It could be, you could kind of have it so you started as a question,
right?
And at the end you have it as the answer.
Or I reiterate it, because the powerful thing is, like they always say, like, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. Otherwise, people don't remember shit. So it's almost like I start with this being like, this is what I'm going to tell you, right? That the human being is a theater upon which the great story and drama of life is here to unfold. And it happens on the simple scale of our own body and mind through the polarities and contrasts within us. If we're deeply honest to ourselves, are we not beset by polarities of wanting to give and also to withhold, of wanting to love, but also being beset by hate, right? Of seeking to create bridges to friendship, but also the yearning to defeat and vanquish enemies? Like all those are within us, right? And so to say that is a shadow play of the ground in which this entire drama of life has always been playing out, and then kind of go into saying, and why is this necessary? Why is this mythologically designed so that how would I put that?
Bring it into Bitcoin again. So somehow
Bitcoin,
right? Bitcoin's the reference point, right?
Would there be a Bitcoin if there wasn't an extractive financial system not based upon that? Basically, because I think the premise of Bitcoin is that because there's a limited supply and it is transparent as to who owns the Bitcoin, you can't actually have any additional creation of this currency, and you cannot manipulate the market. And what is it that the financial system can do today? They can create endless supplies of money, and they can corner and manipulate the global markets because of that. They can buy up everybody, which is what Bitcoin is saying. No, not if we do it this way.
Well, isn't Bitcoin, it's kind of like the opposite of inflation, right? Because inflation is really created by printing money, and all of a sudden it gets devalued. In Bitcoin, you can't do that. You can't print anymore, right?
You can't. No, but look at the inflation of Bitcoin is far extends even any inflation in the history of any printed money. I mean, think about it. Okay, yeah, maybe 60 years ago, you're like, I don't know, your $1 could buy you probably like, I don't know, a thing of groceries,
A lot, yeah,
right? $1 could buy you a lot. Now it would take you $20 to buy what 60 years ago or 100 years ago, $1 could buy you.
for sure.
Bitcoin 10 years ago could buy you 1,000 times more now than what it could buy you in the past. So I'm curious about that.
Mm. Well, I mean, I think you've got it. I mean, you've got the whole thing. I think you just got to work out what are the essential elements that you want them to have before going into the story, and
I
then
don't think I'm smart
somehow
enough.
connect.
I don't think I understand it enough. I don't think I
think
got it.
no, I think you do. But and again, if you don't, like, in the next couple of days, you got to do some research with these people. Like, I would say in 4 or 5 good conversations with these people, if you
Yeah.
ask the right questions, they'll give you the answers.
If I
Especially the
ask the
guy
right questions.
especially who's organizing it.
Yeah. 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 There's a few people here who are really well, I have this Bitcoin magazine that I feel will answer a lot of these questions for me in terms of where they're at as a community, things that they're interested in thinking about. Because I get the sense that this protocol that people are working on, they're already coming and they're like already beating this horse to death. Like they're they're going to be talking about this protocol and da, but I think there's a lot of people that are coming here because they want to be inspired and have a vision of something greater. Like my talk doesn't need to be about even related to their protocol. It needs to be like what you're doing here is part of something way bigger. And the excitement of saying, yeah, this like little social media protocol that we're building is part of a way big myth. And then people are like, yeah, that's why this is what I'm all about, kind of thing. Like I think people need to get that moment where they're like, yes, now I really get a sense of like the purpose of what I'm doing, and I'm going to fully be in that. And at the same time, do it from a place where I can step into the middle and see that the forces that I'm fighting against could also be me from the position of the middle, but it's not going to stop me from enacting our role. Because I think if there's something that social media has really done over the past couple of years, has shown us how powerfully it can divide us. Like it has been such a force for division.
Mm.
And if they're building another social media network that's going to produce that kind of division, I'm like, maybe that's part of the thing. That's why they need a inflamatrix software system so that everybody can see each other's viewpoints so that they don't do that. Like, what would it be if they built a social media network where they were able to do stuff that you and Ram have been talking about, where it's like, you have to have good sense making. You have to inhabit viewpoints. And by doing that, you're actually, that's the nectar of immortality, actually, is wisdom and compassion to see the bigger picture, right? Because at the end of the day, once the devas got the nectar, Brahma said, you have to make peace with your cousins. You have to not enact what they would do, which is try to decimate you.
Uh, uh,
Because if you get the power, you're going to be like, now we're going to fucking crush them.
mm.
Maybe that's what needs to happen. I don't know, but
Well, I think a bit of make peace with your enemies. You know, Maladon and Somé, like, to that redemption. Like, if you have a chance to read that, read it, because it really affected me in terms of, because I'm always on the bandwagon against the bad guys. And as I've grown older, or just in the last little while, there's a lot less energy around wanting to participate in anything like that. I recently read something. You have to go beyond your perspective. You have to go beyond your opinion. You have to go beyond that to get to a place where you're actually going to touch the truth, because you can't be attached to some particular perspective. And I think anything that I've learned with all these cards and everything, there's a million perspectives, and it's unending, the amount of perspectives, and to hold on to one as being right,
right.
is ridiculous. It's all contextual, it's all relative, and it all changes, so quickly, depending upon what scale you're operating at, which situation you're in, who you're with. Like, we have to be adaptable. And I think, you know, because let's say the dark forces hold all the military cards, there's never going to be a victory in that way. But the victory comes when, I think the victory is going to be a lot more subtle in terms of like when all the people started stopping smoking in restaurants. All of a sudden it just changed. All of a sudden it wasn't cool to smoke in a restaurant and everyone just did that. I think it's going to be something like that, where all of a sudden, you know, like the basic greed, right? Like, I mean, there's just this incredible greed behind getting this money and having these huge, you know, it just doesn't make sense to me
Yeah.
at all how we glorify.
We're just going to be like, they'll just be like that. Why would you do that kind of thing?
Yeah. Like,
Well, that was Gandhi's idea. That was basically his vision. He said that like over time, the changing of the social conscience, the slow and inexorable changing of social conscience is what is going to produce the shift where over time people will just feel like that's not right for us to do. And like the progressive increase of that, but that's part of the downside of the woke movement in some ways too. When you aggressively push it too hard or something, like you get a backlash, right? But I'm with you. I agree with you.
I'm just
I hear
wondering
what you're saying.
if we could wrap it up a bit. My throat is really starting to go.
Yeah, I thought that.
But I've been really enjoying this conversation, and
Yeah, likewise.
I feel great joy in what you're about to do. I think it's feels really good that you're in that position.
Yeah, I feel like the creator is putting me here and to, I don't know, somehow communicate and make connections with these folk. Um, because it's so important they come together. I need to really think about things more deeply so that if I'm going to be in the moment, because a lot of the great speeches of our time, they were written, you know, like whether it was MLK or Gandhi or, you know, or any of these people. I always thought that they had written them. Churchill, like, didn't they write their speeches? Right? Pretty much all of them.
I don't know. I mean, I think people talk better without a written speech because I can hear it. And I think when
Yeah.
people are truly speaking from their heart, that the spirit comes through. And I think you'll do that. Like, I really advise against really coming up with anything written. But do the deep thinking, really think about it. And then when you're up there, I think you really got to look at your timing because you've got only a short amount of time. And
Yeah.
then you've got to decide whether you really want the audience to participate or not. I would push for it. I think the audience should. I think the one person at the front on the pulpit is not really the best educational type of thing. You want to get them excited, get them scared, give them the story, then give them an exercise, let them break into groups, let them come back and give a brief summary, and then hit them with what you think is give them what your point of view is.
Okay, thanks, Elijah. I'm gonna sit with it. I'm gonna give some more thought to this because, yeah, I thought after reading that to you, I was like, yeah, I agree. I need to digest this more deeply and then really listen and talk to people while I'm here, and then speak to the what's here in the moment for people. Yeah. Okay. Take care, brother. Talk to you soon.
Okay, love you.
Bye. Bye.